The sound of breaking glass shattered the evening air as Marcus Reeves' fist connected with the storefront window. Blood trickled down his knuckles, but the pain didn't register. All 5 young men who had been surrounding the terrified woman seconds earlier now stared at him in shocked silence. The bustling street had gone completely still, as if the entire world was holding its breath. "The next one," Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, "goes through someone's face. If you're feeling that chill down your spine right now, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of everyday heroes. Your support helps us bring these important moments to light." Marcus Reeves hadn't planned on becoming anyone's hero that evening. At 42, his dark hair now speckled with gray, he was simply trying to make it home in time to help his 14-year-old daughter Emma with her science project. The weight of single parenthood had carved permanent lines around his eyes since losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago. Life had become a delicate balancing act between his job as a construction foreman and raising a teenage daughter who missed her mother desperately. Before cancer took Sarah, they had been the family everyone envied, the high school sweethearts who still held hands at movies, the parents who never missed a soccer game or dance recital. Sarah had been the glue that held them together, her laughter filling their modest 3-bedroom home with a warmth that lingered long after she was gone. In the hollow silence that followed her passing, Marcus had learned to be both mother and father, struggling to decode the mysterious world of adolescent girls while trying to keep his own grief at bay. Each morning for 3 years, he'd wake before dawn, stare at the empty pillow beside him, and force himself to stand up and face another day. He'd make Emma's lunch, never quite getting it right the way Sarah had, and then head to work, where the physical demands of construction at least allowed him temporary escape from his thoughts. His crew respected him for never bringing his personal struggles to the job, never realizing how much strength it took for him to maintain that facade of normalcy. That Thursday evening, Marcus had stopped at Chen's grocery on Maple Street to pick up ingredients for dinner. He was mentally calculating how much time he had left before Emma would start texting him with increasingly anxious messages about her project deadline. His phone already had 3 missed calls from his mother-in-law, Linda, who had appointed herself the unofficial guardian of Sarah's memory and regularly called to remind Marcus of all the ways he was failing to live up to her daughter's standards. The fluorescent lights of Chen's grocery buzzed overhead as Marcus navigated the narrow aisles, grabbing pasta, sauce, and the pre-made garlic bread that Emma preferred. Mr. Chen, a 67-year-old immigrant who had owned the store for nearly 4 decades, nodded in recognition from behind the counter. They had a wordless rapport, 2 men who understood that sometimes life demanded more than seemed possible to give. "Emma's science project?" Mr. Chen asked as he rang up the items. Marcus nodded, appreciating that someone remembered the details of his life. "Solar system model. Due tomorrow." "Ah," Mr. Chen replied with a knowing smile. "My grandson did that last year. We used ping-pong balls and lots of glue." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "The secret is fishing line to hang the planets. Invisible but strong." Marcus tucked this advice away gratefully. "Thanks, Mr. Chen. I'll remember that." As he gathered his bags and headed toward the door, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the store window, the tired eyes, the stubbled jaw, the slumped shoulders of a man carrying an invisible weight. Sarah would have teased him about needing a haircut, would have run her fingers through the overlong strands at the nape of his neck. The phantom touch made him shiver even in the warm evening air. That's when he noticed them, 5 young men, probably in their early 20s, surrounding a woman near the alley entrance beside the convenience store. Something in their posture, the way they had positioned themselves to block any easy escape, triggered an alarm in Marcus's mind. Amina Kazemi had just finished her shift at the hospital. The 28-year-old resident was exhausted after a grueling 36-hour rotation in the emergency room. Her dark eyes, usually bright and attentive, were heavy with fatigue as she cut through the side street that would shave 10 minutes off her walk home. All she could think about was collapsing into bed and stealing a few precious hours of sleep before returning to the hospital the next day. She hadn't always wanted to be a doctor. Growing up in a small apartment above her parents' Persian restaurant, young Amina had dreamed of becoming a writer, filling notebooks with stories that blended the ancient tales her grandmother told her with the American life she observed outside the restaurant windows. But during her senior year of high school, her father had suffered a major heart attack. The competent, compassionate care of the emergency room doctor had saved his life and ignited a new passion in Amina. Medical school had been a struggle, not academically, as Amina had always been a stellar student, but financially and culturally. Her parents had sacrificed everything to support her education, working longer hours at the restaurant, never complaining even as their own health began to deteriorate under the strain. The pressure to succeed, to make their sacrifice worthwhile, sometimes kept Amina awake at night even when exhaustion demanded sleep. Now, in her second year of residency, Amina balanced on the knife edge between confidence and terror that all medical residents know well. Each day brought new challenges, new patients whose lives literally depended on her knowledge and judgment. Today had been particularly difficult. A multi-car accident had brought 8 trauma patients to the ER simultaneously, including a 5-year-old girl who reminded Amina painfully of her niece. The girl had survived, thanks in part to Amina's quick recognition of internal bleeding that might have been overlooked in the chaos. But the victory felt hollow against the backdrop of the patients they couldn't save, including the girl's father. Delivering that news to the mother, watching as her world collapsed in real time, had left Amina emotionally raw. She didn't notice the group of men until they had already formed a loose circle around her. Their laughter had an edge to it that made her stomach tighten. One of them, wearing a red baseball cap turned backward, stepped directly into her path. "Hey there, beautiful. Why the rush?" he asked, his smile not reaching his eyes. Amina clutched her purse tighter and tried to step around him. "I need to get home." Another one moved to block her path. "Come on, we just want to talk." "Don't be like that." The one in the red cap, Jason Miller, though Amina wouldn't learn his name until much later, moved closer, invading her personal space. At 24, Jason had already accumulated a history of minor offenses that hinted at a deeper disregard for boundaries and consent. Raised in affluence but emotionally neglected by parents too busy with their own lives to notice their son's growing cruelty, Jason had learned early that money could make most problems disappear. "You look exotic," Jason said, reaching out to touch Amina's hijab. "Where are you from?" Amina jerked back, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm American. Please let me pass." The tallest of the group, Ethan Delaney, Jason's roommate from their brief college career before both dropped out, laughed. "He means originally. You know, before you came here." "I was born in Chicago," Amina replied, anger beginning to cut through her fear. She had dealt with this kind of ignorance before, but usually not while physically surrounded and isolated. "Chicago, huh?" Jason smirked. "Funny, you don't look like you're from Chicago." The third man, Kyle Peterson, a childhood friend of Jason's with a history of following his lead regardless of the consequences, moved to Amina's left, effectively cutting off any escape route to the main street. "Maybe we could get some coffee, and you could tell us all about Chicago." The remaining two, brothers Damon and Derek Walsh, known in their neighborhood for their volatile tempers and pack mentality, completed the circle around her. Damon's hand hovered near Amina's purse, his intentions unclear but threatening. "I said no," Amina stated firmly, though her voice betrayed a slight tremor. "Move aside." Jason's expression hardened, the pretense of friendliness evaporating. "Or what? Nobody likes a tease, doctor." He gestured toward her hospital ID badge, still clipped to her scrubs. "Think you're better than us because you've got some fancy education?" Marcus had seen enough. He'd witnessed this scene play out before, young men mistaking fear for playing hard to get, the gradual escalation, the power dynamics that could quickly turn dangerous. He thought of Emma, of how he'd want someone to step in if she were in this situation. Before he could second-guess himself, his feet were already moving. The grocery bags were suddenly heavy in his hands, an encumbrance that might limit his response if things turned physical. With deliberate calm, Marcus set them down beside a newspaper stand, his eyes never leaving the scene unfolding across the street. His mind raced through scenarios, calculating risks and potential outcomes. There were 5 of them, all younger and probably faster than he was. Direct confrontation could escalate the situation, possibly putting the woman in greater danger. But doing nothing wasn't an option he could live with. "Hey!" Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the street. "Leave her alone." The group turned, momentarily distracted. The one in the red cap looked Marcus up and down and smirked. "Mind your own business, old man. We're just having a friendly conversation." Amina's eyes met Marcus's, silent desperation evident in her expression. The fear he saw there ignited something primal in him, a protective instinct that surged through his veins like wildfire. "She doesn't look like she wants to talk to you," Marcus said, closing the distance between them. He wasn't a particularly large man, but years of construction work had hardened his frame. "Step aside and let her go." Jason's smirk widened as his friends moved closer, forming a new semicircle that now included Marcus. "And what if we don't?" In that moment, memories cascaded through Marcus's mind, Sarah in the hospital, so small in her final days, whispering to him to protect their daughter, Emma at 12 years old, crying when a group of older boys had destroyed her science fair project, his father, a Vietnam veteran, telling him that sometimes a man needed to take a stand, even when the odds were against him. What happened next would replay in slow motion in the witness's memories for years to come. Marcus didn't say another word. Instead, he turned slightly, as if to walk away, then suddenly pivoted and slammed his fist through the convenience store's front window. The sound was explosive in the evening air, a declaration that negotiations had failed. And that's when the street went silent. Blood dripped from Marcus's knuckles onto the sidewalk as he stood perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Jason's face. The next one goes through someone's face. The shards of glass scattered across the pavement glinted under the streetlights like diamonds. Inside the convenience store, a startled customer dropped their coffee, adding to the sudden tableau of frozen motion. Down the block, a young couple walking their dog stopped mid-stride, the woman's hand flying to her mouth in shock. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Jason raised his hands in surrender, his bravado evaporating. "Whoa, man. We were just messing around. No need to go crazy. Walk away," Marcus said simply. "Now." They did, muttering threats under their breath that no one believed they'd follow through on. As they retreated, Jason turned back once, his expression a complex mixture of humiliation and rage, a look Marcus would come to recognize as the prelude to far greater troubles. For now, though, the immediate danger had passed. Marcus turned to Amina, who was trembling slightly, her knuckles white around the strap of her purse. "Are you all right?" he asked, the fierceness in his eyes softening into concern. Amina nodded, finding her voice. "Yes. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Don't think about it," Marcus interrupted gently. "Let me walk you home." The adrenaline that had propelled him into action was beginning to ebb, and with it came the first waves of pain from his injured hand. He flexed his fingers experimentally, wincing as the movement sent fresh blood trickling down his wrist. "Your hand," Amina said, her professional instincts overriding her lingering fear. "That needs medical attention." As they started walking, the store owner emerged, yelling about the broken window. Marcus pulled out his wallet with his uninjured hand. "I'll pay for it. Send me the bill." He handed the man his business card, then turned back to Amina. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Amina," she replied, noticing for the first time how badly his hand was bleeding. "You need medical attention." "I'm a doctor, let me help you." Mr. Chen, who had witnessed everything from inside his store, hurried out with a clean dish towel. "Here, for your hand," he said, pressing it gently against Marcus's bleeding knuckles. "What you did?" He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. Not many would have the courage. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Among them, a young woman with vibrant blue hair held up her phone. "I got it all on video," she announced. "From the moment those creeps surrounded her. The police should see this." Marcus shook his head. "No police. Not necessary." The last thing he needed was official attention, questions, paperwork, all delaying his return to Emma, who was probably already wondering where he was. "But those guys," the blue-haired woman began to protest. "They're gone," Marcus said firmly. "That's what matters." Amina stepped forward. "I appreciate you wanting to help, but he's right. I just want to go home." She turned to Marcus. "Will you still walk with me? It's not far, and I can properly clean that wound." That moment marked the beginning of a connection neither of them had been looking for. As they walked the 6 blocks to Amina's apartment building, the initial awkwardness between them gradually dissolved. Marcus called Emma to explain his delay, careful to omit the more dramatic details of his evening. "Just helping someone out," he told his daughter. "I'll be home in about an hour. Can you start setting up your project materials?" Emma's sigh was audible even through the phone. "Dad, I told you yesterday, I need the special glue from Michael's. The regular stuff won't hold the planets." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, remembering now that she had indeed mentioned this, probably while he was distracted with bills or work emails. "Right, sorry. I'll stop and get it on my way home." "Everything okay?" Amina asked when he ended the call. "Teenage daughter," Marcus replied with a rueful smile. "Science project crisis. Solar system model?" Amina guessed. Marcus looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" "I was a teenage girl not that long ago," she said with a small laugh. "That project is a middle school rite of passage. My father stayed up all night helping me paint Neptune just the right shade of blue." There was something in the way she mentioned her father, a softness in her voice, a hint of memory that brought comfort, that made Marcus wonder about her family. Before he could ask, they arrived at her apartment building, a modest 6-story structure with window boxes adorning some of the balconies. "I'm on the 3rd floor," Amina said, hesitating at the entrance. "You don't have to come up if you're in a hurry to get back to your daughter." Marcus glanced at his hand, which had stopped actively bleeding but throbbed with a deep, persistent pain. "If you don't mind taking a quick look at it, I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, I'll probably just wrap it in a dishcloth and hope for the best." Amina's apartment reflected both her heritage and her practical nature. The living room featured a Persian rug in rich blues and reds that had been a gift from her grandmother, alongside mismatched furniture clearly chosen for comfort rather than style. Medical textbooks shared shelf space with volumes of poetry and literary fiction. On the wall hung framed photographs, Amina as a child with her parents outside their restaurant, Amina in her white coat on her first day of residency, an older couple Marcus assumed were her parents standing with a younger woman who bore a striking resemblance to Amina and a little girl about 5 years old. "My sister and niece," Amina explained, following his gaze as she led him to the kitchen sink. "They live in Detroit. I don't see them nearly enough." As she cleaned and bandaged his hand, her touch professional but gentle, they talked, about her residency, about his daughter Emma, about the city they both loved despite its occasional darkness. Marcus found himself sharing details of his life he rarely discussed with anyone, how he still sometimes reached for Sarah in the middle of the night, how he worried that Emma was drifting away from him in ways he couldn't quite define, how the construction company he worked for was struggling financially, making his position less secure than he'd like. "Why did you do that?" Amina asked finally. "Break the window, I mean. You could have just threatened them." Marcus considered her question carefully. "Words don't always work. Sometimes people need to see what you're capable of." He flexed his bandaged hand. "Besides, better the window than one of them. I don't need that kind of trouble." What Marcus didn't say, what he barely acknowledged even to himself, was that in the moment his fist connected with the glass, he had felt more alive than he had in the 3 years since Sarah died. The sharp pain, the decisive action, the absolute clarity of purpose, all of it had cut through the fog of grief and routine that had enveloped his days. "Well, Dr. Kazemi," he said, standing up and testing his bandaged hand, "thank you for the excellent care. I should get going before Emma declares a state of emergency over her solar system." Amina walked him to the door. "Thank you again, Marcus. What you did." She paused, searching for words. "It matters. More than you know." As Marcus headed to the craft store for Emma's glue, he replayed Amina's words in his mind. It matters. 3 years of simply going through the motions, of doing what needed to be done without any real sense of purpose beyond surviving until the next day, and suddenly, unexpectedly, he had done something that mattered. The next morning, Marcus's phone rang. It was Mr. Chen, the convenience store owner. To Marcus's surprise, he wasn't calling about payment for the window. A video of the confrontation had gone viral overnight, captured by the blue-haired bystander who had been too intimidated to help but had recorded everything. The community was rallying around what they saw as an act of courage, with many offering tea.